Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'll be recording this meeting today for those who aren't able to join us, and I'll be sure to send the video link in our upcoming BHI Network Policy Digest. So let's get this meeting started with the land acknowledgement. We would like to open this convening by recognizing that we are on the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We cannot work to fulfill our mission and our vision of an anti-racist present if we don't first acknowledge and recognize the true history and cost of colonization. However, acknowledgement is only a first step, and so we encourage you to engage in accountable actions and relationships. So first, just a few quick announcements as everyone is walking into the space here. Please be sure to send me any updates or info that should be going into our Friday Policy Digest. Things that are great and good for the whole, having to do with our policy or with things happening in your communities. I basically look to you all to stay informed on the news that's pertinent to our shared priority to increase Black homeownership. And if you're not yet signed up for the weekly BHI Network Policy Digest, please do so. And then feel free to invite others to do that as well. We want to continue to grow this network and our impact. And given that we are moving into all of the legislative session, the session will be having a lot of opportunities for advocacy. The state legislative session will begin on Monday. And the Seattle Comp Plan is now in the hands of the Seattle City Council. So there's many upcoming opportunities to build your advocacy muscles by signing in pro for bills and providing written or verbal testimony during this process. So if one of your New Year's resolutions was to be a strong advocate for change, then you'll have many opportunities to do so. After our quick kind of icebreaker activity, we are going to move into a really packed agenda. So sorry if I'm not able to kind of welcome you visually as you're coming in. But our meeting during the legislative session, we often need to cover kind of several topics because there are many bills out there that can further our shared priority to increase Black homeownership. Today we'll be hearing from Senator Jessica Bateman. This newly elected senator, who you know from the House, is the new senator of the 22nd Legislative District. She will be the new chair of the Senate Housing Committee and a member of the Local Government Committee. Senator Bateman will talk to us about the Housing for All caucus priorities, the Housing Accountability Act, and her parking reform bill. We'll also hear from Senator Noel Frame, who will be the new Vice Chair of Finance on the Ways and Means Committee, Vice Chair of the Human Services Committee, and a member of the Housing Committee. Senator Frame will be talking to us about her wealth tax bill. Dan Bertolet of Sightline Institute will talk about the lot splitting bill, and Jesse Simpson of HTC will let us know how we can lean on in for that Seattle Comprehensive Plan as it's moving through its meetings right now in the Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan that is chaired by Councilmember Joy Hollinsworth. And then I'm going to close us out with a rundown of the state legislative process and timeline and kind of a reminder of what policy actions we're highlighting in our homeownership policy framework. And then we'll end with some open floor time for you to share any news that's good for the group. And with all of this variety on our agenda today, that time should just kind of fly on by. And before we know it, we'll all be heading out to lunch, and it looks like we may have some sun rays. So I encourage you all to get out. It's never a guarantee in the winter that we're going to have a sunny afternoon. But before we delve into that kind of full agenda, I just want us to take a bit of a pause to share with one another. And it's the beginning of the new year, and a year that, has many unknowns coming. It might be causing a bit of anxiety for us. So I hope you all had a memorable and joyful holiday season to help you kind of fill up and get ready for this year. But many of us may be brainstorming about where we plan to find refuge during difficult times this year. And we're all here around homeownership, Our home is often our first place of refuge, so I hope that some of you might be willing to share a little about where you find comfort in your home, both as a way for us to connect with one another a little bit, but also as a way to kind of gift one another some ideas for respite. I'll share and say that for me, it's on my urban rooftop farm. I grow food there that I donate to the Bird Bar Food Bank and the Lowell Elementary School food pantry. And every minute that I'm up there working with my hands and kind of witnessing that miracle of seed to fruit, I'm calmed and I'm comforted, and it really fills me up. So, where do you find comfort in your home? And, feel free to chime in. We're not going to get to everyone before Senator Bateman arrives, but we can hear from a few people in the next 10 minutes or so. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that we can all see one another a little bit better. Good morning.
Good morning.
Regina, are you wanting to share? That would be
I
great.
I am. I live in Renton. The Hyatt Lake Washington and Boeing factory are my neighbors. I pay way, way, way too much rent to do so. And I have this little pocket of waterfront view from a particular corner in my living room. And I spend as much time as I can there when I need to decompress. And it's definitely, as we all know, already a week where there needs to be a lot of decompression. Both of my children are in Los Angeles, so that's angsty. But really happy to be among all of you today and looking forward to our work together in the coming year.
Thanks so much for that, Regina. All it takes is a little sliver, right? We don't need it all. We just need that little sliver that kind of fills us up. Is there anyone else who might want to share, where do you find comfort in your home? Denise?
Good morning. I'll be honest and say my entire home brings me comfort. I think I realized during the pandemic, I'm just so grateful that I have this space. I did a lot of work on my back patio to make it into a place where I could still have social time with friends, but be safe. And so now that's probably one of the places that I most enjoy. I have a fire pit and like a canopy that protects me from the rain, and like an outdoor rug and plants and things. And so I like sitting back there, and with the fire pit, I can sit back there, any time of year, and kind of enjoy the quiet, or, watching the leaves do things or fall off or buds coming, I really enjoy that.
I love that. That sounds fabulous, Denise. Anyone else want to share? Where do you find comfort in your home?
I want to share
Good morning, Ms. Ruby.
Ruby, and I find comfort right where I'm sitting in this big overstuffed chair. It's where I have all my Zoom meetings, and so it's a place that keeps me connected to the issues that I want to stay connected to. Unfortunately, I'm right next to a big window that lets too much light in. It seems like whenever there is a Zoom meeting, all of a sudden the sun comes out too, but I guess that's a good thing.
Sun is always a good thing in my book. So I love that you have that one issue, but that sounds lovely. Who else would like to share? Where do you find comfort in your home? We're here together as a policy group talking about homeownership policy. We understand how it's essential. And I think it's really important that we can, share some of those stories about why we want to help others have that comfort, and why we feel great about that comfort that we have. Erica, you're looking right at me. You're showing up on my screen. I'm gonna.
I'll bite. I just spent some money remodeling our tiny bathroom, and it now has a
Ooh.
heated floor. And I would hate to say that I find the most comfort in my home on the floor of my bathroom, but at the very moment, that's the best place that there is. I've never been a bath taker, and
Mm.
we were going to remove the bathtub for a variety of reasons. We ended up keeping it. And now that the bathroom is my favorite room in the house, I might just start taking baths. So maybe there.
You know,
Great.
I think those heated floors would have been a bit of a danger for me during the pandemic, right? Everyone did their like crying on the bathroom floor moment during the pandemic. And if they were heated, I might not have left, you know? So congrats. I hope you're going to enjoy that.
Thanks.
I can share.
Hi, Krista.
Yeah, my name's Krista. I think that for me, I find so much comfort having my morning cup of coffee on the couch. And usually one of my dogs is snuggled up next to me. And so for me, it's a lot of like warmth and security, and it's a time to reflect before my day starts. So I think that's where I find a lot of comfort in my home.
Sounds great.
I'll go.
Hi, Loretta.
I find a lot of comfort in my backyard, which is crazy because people will ask me what my favorite room of the house is, and it's my backyard. There's a lot of good family memories back there, and it's a place where I can just sit and it's quiet and I can plant flowers and watch them grow. And so for me, it's my timeout. I put myself in timeout. So unless it's snowing, that's where I'll be.
Although when it's snowing, it might be a lovely place to be as well, right?
Well, it's a little slippery.
Yeah, you got to work like Denise and get yourself, you know, a little stove out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Had
House
one at
rules.
one time, but yeah, the summers, like anywhere, September to or April to September. That's, you have a little fire out in your backyard and the shady trees, just really good.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think we have time for maybe one more person who has got that kind of great where they find comfort in their home. We can all maybe put in our back pocket as we move into this next year.
I'll go.
Robert,
Just 'cause it's been
is that
gendered.
you?
Yeah. So we moved into a new house, and my wife's an architect, so our house will never be done. But one thing we did as we moved in was put skylights in, and we put a skylight above in our bedroom. And actually, I grew up in a house in New Hampshire that has a skylight above my bed, so that sort of feels like reminiscent and connecting. Unfortunately, the skylight in Seattle isn't quite as good because there's not as many stars, but it's still nice to have all the light you can get during the winter months. So I really appreciate that touch. It feels like the extra effort was worth it.
Well, and you're getting some sun today through there, I hope. So,
That's
you
right.
know, nice diffuse light from the ceiling. Always great. Light from above. We'll take it in any form, you know. like, all right. Well, I am excited to be here today. I know we have quite a series of presenters who are coming forward here. It is a little difficult on Zoom to always know who's in the room when we have a number of people. So Senator Jessica Bateman is going to be speaking with us. And I will just ask Senator Bateman if you're in the space for you to go ahead and unmute and begin with us. And if you're not yet here, we can hear from one more person about finding comfort in their home as we wait for Senator Bateman to arrive. I'm not sure if you've all had that scenario of making an appointment with a senator or a representative. You know, they got their 15-minute snippets and they've got them scheduled out. And so, you know, we're going to have a little grace for Senator Bateman, hoping that she'll be able to pass right through into our meeting, but we'll just continue to share until we see her in the space. And Jesse, maybe if you can help me by kind of monitoring the participants and let me know a heads up there if you happen to see her or her LA. So one other person here, Peter, I don't know if you just came into the room, but we're doing a little bit of an icebreaker. We're sharing where we find comfort in our home as we start to think about this next year and maybe needing a little bit of refuge. Might you want to share where you find comfort in your home today?
There we go.
There you go.
You're calling on me specifically. Unfair.
Well,
Wow.
it was right
Um,
there, and I thought I'd like to know.
My favorite place in the house lately is also in the backyard where I have a flagpole. But I haven't been flying the American flag that much lately. I've been flying the Christmas flag. The Canadian flag is up, interestingly enough, right now. I flew an orca flag. So I have a collection of flags that countries I've been to, things I like orca whales. I have to be careful when I select for political reasons. Sometimes it's a good looking flag, but maybe not the right time to show it. But it's been fun and neighbors like it. And so it's sort of a symbolic place for me.
Kind of a little bit of a ritual, something to do. All right. Well, and it looks like we have Senator Bateman in the room. Senator Bateman, if you can hear me, I have made you co-host if you need anything that way, but please do feel to just free to unmute, and we're all here to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation. I do not have any slides to share, unfortunately. It's the week before session, so I'm not that prepared, but I appreciate the invite to share my screen. I'm really happy to be with you here today to talk about some of the housing issues that are before us coming into the 2025 legislative session. Obviously, our housing crisis has continued to grow despite the steps that we've taken in the last couple years to address our housing shortage, including legalizing things like middle housing and ADUs, et cetera. We still have a tremendous housing shortage of between 150 to 250,000 homes. And the Department of Commerce has told us we need to build 1 million in the next 20 years. For reference, our Housing Trust Fund has created about 65,000 homes in the last almost 40 years. So that just speaks to the scale and the breadth of the need and necessity. And what I've argued is that our housing solutions must be commensurate with the challenge before us, which really requires that we look at how are we making it much more efficient, much more cost effective and quicker to build the housing that Washingtonians need. I'm sure many of you saw the Elway poll that just came out today, I believe, where residents in Washington were asked about what are the top issues that are impacting them. Obviously, most families and a majority of the respondents said that the cost of living is extremely high for them and that they're struggling to get by and to make ends meet. 68% of the respondents said that they were in favor of having some limit on the amount of rent that landlords can charge to help decrease and kind of stabilize those costs. We know that how much you pay for rent is one of the largest budget items for a family, and so many of our residents in Washington are cost burden spending 30 to 50% of their money, their income on their housing costs, which is really financially unsustainable. It also makes them much at a higher risk of falling into homelessness and losing their home. One of the notes about that is our largest growing sector of our unhoused population is actually seniors. Seniors are one of our really vulnerable areas because they're on fixed incomes, and one of the ways that rent stabilization could really help is by helping folks that are on those fixed incomes as well. The other thing that I wanted to note from that Elway poll was that 63% said that they supported increasing our investment in affordable housing. We are going into a difficult budget year, as I'm sure everyone is very well aware of. And one of the things we have to advocate for is continuing our investment in affordable housing in Washington State. We're going to have to make tough budget decisions. It's going to be really imperative that we have support from organizations such as yourself asking us and really demanding us to do that. I would argue that we have to focus on the 3 areas of our holistic approach to solving our housing shortage and crisis, which is we have to increase our supply, making sure that we're building housing of all shapes and sizes so everyone has the opportunity to have a home, as well as stabilizing people where they are, making sure that people aren't falling into homelessness, helping them get by with things with rent stabilization, our doc recording fee is another issue that we're going to need to address from a budget perspective because those funds are down, and that's one of the ways that we help stabilize our renters. Also, folks like living in long-term care facilities that now are protected through our Right to Counsel program. So that's something that we're actually going to talk about in the Housing Committee next Friday, and the new requirement that they have the right to counsel. And then also rent stabilization, capping the amount of rent, putting a max on the amount of rent that folks can charge to help provide predictability and stability for those folks that are living in our rental community. And in addition to that, making sure that we're funding affordable housing and that we're continuing our investment to ensure that we have housing that's very affordable for the lowest income and most vulnerable amongst us. Two bills that I'm sponsoring specifically related to the supply side of all that three-tiered stool that I like to talk about. One is the Housing Accountability Act. That is a bill that I introduced last year and is imperative for us to be able to achieve our infill housing that we have made legal in Washington State. In 2023, we made it legal to build middle housing anywhere, essentially, also ADUs. And then in 2024, we passed a law requiring cities to allow for co-living spaces, as well as permanent supportive housing. That was the year before in 2022 or 2021. What we lack right now is any kind of oversight to ensure that the cities in the state of Washington are actually adhering to the law and incorporating those types of ordinances into their local laws and their development regulations to ensure that they don't just legalize, for instance, duplexes, but they actually make it feasible with the square footage requirement for the lot size. You know, if you were to say, technically it's legal, yeah, you can build a duplex anywhere, but if you make the lot size requirement so large, the setback requirement so significant, the height restriction to a certain point, a minimum parking requirement, you essentially eat up the space where it could be feasible to build that project of a duplex and make it not financially feasible to construct or physically feasible to construct. It's, you know, really specific and it's really nuanced, but we do need to ensure that we have oversight, which we lack right now. So this bill will have that oversight through the Department of Commerce, and it will have some solution mechanisms, including the builder's remedy, which states if you are out of compliance as a city and a developer comes in with a proposal to build a project of housing, including a percentage of affordable units, you cannot deny the permit with some caveats. This is directly related to our problem statement, which is we don't have enough housing, and the solution, we need more. It obviously includes a lot of remedies for cities to come into compliance before the builder's remedy kicks in, but we do need to have a mechanism for some type of policy solution should cities decide that they're not going to adhere to the law. So that's one bill. It was introduced in the House last year, got through the Housing Committee all the way to appropriations. And this year we're going to have it introduced in the Senate via me, myself, and then also the chair of the Housing Committee in the House, Representative Strom Peterson. My bill just dropped yesterday, House or Senate bill. I'm going to have to get used to saying that. Senate Bill 5148. And then my other bill that I'm very, very excited about is a parking reform and modernization bill. One of the big ways that we make it infeasible to build housing in Washington, which is very, very old and archaic, is we have minimum parking requirements. Almost every city requires a minimum amount of parking to be reserved when you go to build housing and commercial space and retail space. And what we know is there are so many people that don't have a car or have only one car or just simply don't need a car, don't want a car. And so what this bill does is it says we're going to create a max amount that you can require for development to occur for residential by dwelling and also for commercial space. So for dwellings, it's half a space per dwelling. And then for commercial space, it's one space per 1,000 square feet. The reason why this is so important is that especially when we talk about infill housing, so middle housing, or great example is accessory dwelling units, small scale infill housing, exactly where we need it, where we want it. It could be housing for intergenerational families to live. It could be a place where a senior rents an ADU on their property for supplemental income for themselves. When you have a parking requirement that eats up so much space that could be used to house a person, it makes it very expensive or it makes it infeasible. So you could have an opportunity with infill if you have a lot large enough, like I have in my house. I wouldn't be able to build it if I had to actually have a paved parking space requirement. So what this does is it says we have a max that you can require. A developer, if they would like, can go above and beyond that. An example is the City of Olympia has waived minimum parking requirements in its downtown core for certain, and I'm looking at Krista, not if I'm right, is it for apartments, all apartments in downtown? No.
Yeah, all multifamily in our downtown.
Thank you. It's been a couple years since I was at the City of Olympia. So all multifamily in downtown Olympia, there are no minimum parking requirements if you want to build an apartment complex or apartments above retail. But the developer can choose to build a parking structure if they want. And in fact, many of them have in the last number of years, because they take a look at what is actually feasible. Are people going to use this? Is this an area that's got enough transit or bike lanes? They do that themselves. And most of the time they actually do parking, but we don't want to require it and make it not feasible and not happen unnecessarily. Another example that I like to use, no dissing on my beloved city of Olympia, but if you come to the great city of Olympia, Washington, and you go to our west side, we have a small scale mall, nothing like you have in King County. And if you go there on any given day, you're going to see a large parking lot that encompasses the vast majority of the footprint of that area. And 90% of those spaces are vacant. But if you were to try to build that structure today, it would not meet the minimum parking requirements. They would have to build more. So this is an example of we're not utilizing the space as we could. It could be viable land that could be used for livable, walkable communities, all different types of things that we want. We want entrepreneurs, we want business, we want people living in these spaces, we want libraries, we have all these things, not to mention childcare facilities, all the different types of housing. So for those facilities in my bill, there are no minimum parking requirements. So it does take that away in those dynamic uses, what I refer to them as. So these areas that we desperately need, like senior housing, like childcare, like permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, or housing for people with disabilities, there's no parking required. And that reflects the necessity of having those and needing those very badly, but also in a lot of those cases, it's unnecessary or unneeded. So with that, that's kind of a preview. I also just want to spotlight, we really need to pass transit-oriented development this year. We need to pass our lot splitting bill to make sure that we can actually build middle housing and have homeownership opportunities. There's a lot more that I could talk about, and I look forward to taking a couple questions before you have me leave.
We have a question in the chat about whether or not you know of a first or second week session hearing. Do you know if SB 514?
I'm going to turn up my volume and ask you to ask that question again.
You bet. When are we going to be looking at the hearing opportunities for the bills that you've mentioned here? So the accountability, SB 5148, is that something that we're going to see coming up in the next week or two?
Yes, so we will see the public hearing for the Housing Accountability Act and our Parking Reform and Modernization Act in week 2 of the legislative session.
So we'll get one moment to catch our breath. Do we have any other questions here today at this moment for Senator Bateman? Looks like we have a suggestion in the chat from a member here. Maybe consider parking allocations by bedroom unit. House with 4 bedrooms may have more drivers. These are the kinds of things that land up in the hearings, and
yes,
when we can send that input, and bills can change through that process. So someone just wanting to bring that up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. This is the starting point for us. We're going to go through many conversations. The middle housing bill that I worked on, we literally negotiated that bill for 25 hours during session alone, not to mention all the work beforehand. I will be the first to admit, we're in a discussion right now with a lot of pro-housing folks. Parking is an area that people have a lot of emotion about. There are a lot of nuance in that, and there's a lot of specific circumstances where we should be having these discussions and being open to them, which I am, and I look forward to talking about that.
And it looks like Patience, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, Senator Bateman, thank you for the work you are doing and just diving right into Senate, leading with this work. On the parking mandates, they are costly and they are a poison pill for housing affordability, and it's important that the work moves forward. Anything we can do to support, whether it's in framing or being in the front of supporting that, we're just offering our hands, our voices for that. Just going back to the Housing Accountability Act, could you speak a little bit more? You say the builder's remedy would kick in after a certain period of time. I want to hear more where that's coming from. Is that concerns about cost or a mandate without fund? Just if you could speak to more color on what's needed for the builder's remedy to kick in, because to me, that's the tool that's going to be essential. And the less delay on that front, the more effective the legislation.
Yeah, I think, the bill itself includes a time period for the Department of Commerce to review cities. They submit their comprehensive plans to the state in December of the year that they're required to do that. And what this would require is that they submit that to the Department of Commerce. Commerce reviews the housing element and then reviews their subsequent ordinances and their development regulations. And we give them, I believe, 180 days in order to do that. In that timeline and in that process, we do give them the opportunity to help course correct for cities that might unintentionally be out of compliance or might need some assistance. We have smaller cities that don't have necessarily the resources. We just want to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to do the right thing and do it well. We know also that our cities are understaffed and having financial challenges. I know that for a fact. My own city is going through that. So it's not an extended period of time beyond that timeline. It's just we want to give them that opportunity.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking some time with us, Senator Bateman. I know you have a busy schedule, and we'll have some other questions. We'll try to forward them your way, but I'm sure you are on to your next. Thank you so much.
Hi, Senator Frame. Good to see you. Good luck. Okay, bye, everybody.
Good to see you, Madam Chair.
And welcome, Senator Noel Frame. We are going to get her great 15 minutes here. Excited to see you. Happy New Year, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Bambi, and to the entire HDC team for having me here, the Black Home Initiative. I am just excited and daunted and all of the above heading into the next session, but delighted to share I will be taking on a new role as the Vice Chair of Finance for the Senate Ways and Means Committee, which is not a position that existed until I asked for it, but here we are. As folks know, when I was in the House, I served as the chair of the House Finance Committee and kind of had hoped when moving to the Senate that we might create sort of a comparable container to talk about the important area of policy that is tax policy, and I'm delighted to share that that has happened with this role. With that, I am part of the team thinking through how to fund state services and thinking about how to do that in a way that is as equitable as possible for the taxpayers of Washington State. And within that package of revenue, which of course will also, we are also looking at scrubbing the budget and looking for cuts as well. So I want to be really clear that that exercise absolutely is happening. But I have a very specific role to sort of look at the other side of the ledger. So that's what I'll talk about today. And within that package, I do plan to bring forward a proposal that I have brought forward the last two biennia, which is the wealth tax proposal. I've been trying to think about a short technical way to explain it. And I've kind of come up with capital assets ownership tax, because it is indeed a tax on the ownership of capital assets, just like we have a tax on the ownership of real estate assets, which is the property tax. And just like we have a tax on the ownership of tangible property, which is the personal property tax that businesses pay. And so really this is addressing what is a really gaping hole in the current tax code and a massive inequity that is intangible assets, specifically financial intangible assets, are completely untaxed, while other types of assets are already taxed. For folks that have been following this legislation, the first year I introduced it, it was a $1 billion exemption. The second year I introduced it, it was a $250 million exemption. And honestly, we're still trying to make a final decision about kind of what is the right level for this session, in part because you just saw the governor introduce legislation putting that mark at $100 million as the sort of exemption level in the governor's proposal. So I think there's still some final conversations to be had as we've put together a broader revenue package. But the proposal has been, again, it's a property tax. It's a 1% flat rate property tax on financial or capital assets with an exemption. And yeah, and the way that we've done it in the past, it's been dedicated to different revenue sources. I think we are, again, and there's so many more conversations to have, kind of given where we are at with the state budget. There are really important needs, not the least of which is addressing affordable housing that are part of that conversation. And so typically, you know, as we have past tax policy in years past, we want to be really thoughtful about connecting the dots for the people of Washington State about the services that this pays for. And I think people have really appreciated that and understood that, for instance, in the capital gains legislation and then the attempt to repeal it, that it would have been a real hit to access to childcare services and school construction. And so I think it's important for us to tell that story, because as much as I wish people loved the ever nuances of tax policy and lived and breathed it at night like I do, turns out I am not a good data point for the rest of the voters of Washington State. So it's really important for us to really think that through and help tell the story to folks. So that is the quick 5-minute overview. Bambi, if there was anything in particular you really wanted to make sure I hit, let me know. Otherwise, I would love to open the floor to questions and see what people have. And full disclosure, I have a sick child at home who's very distracted by his tablet right now. But if he runs in here, apologies in advance that the 4-year-old might want to say hi.
Well, Senator Frame, whether you are a senator or not, life just goes on, right? So one thing I would ask is, as we think about advocacy, are you basically reintroducing the bill at the same bill number? And is that done? And when might we see that first opportunity to advocate?
Yeah, it will most certainly not be the same bill number unless I'm completely brilliant at hitting the timing just right. Don't plan on that. So it will very likely be a different bill number. For folks that want to look at the last proposal, Senate Bill 5486 is the version, but when you're looking for it, make sure you change the biennium so you can find it. And so that would be for folks that want to read up on it as a great way to take a look. The other thing I would encourage folks to do, what's also happened in the last couple of years is the Department of Revenue actually was commissioned to do a study, which they have completed, on this proposal and like proposals. And they talked to different countries, different states, did their own research. I think it's a quick, interesting read. Again, I'm a really bad data point on what constitutes interesting, but I think it's a good read. And if folks want to learn more, that would be a good thing. Timing, Bambi, it's a long session. Revenue bills are not subject to cutoff as the rest. So it's not, you will not see it probably in the first couple of weeks of session. And that is very normal for revenue bills that are just not on the same timeline as other pieces of legislation. So keep out a look for it in the coming weeks-ish. And we'll make sure you all get a number when we have it.
Sounds great. And Patience, you had a question?
Yeah, Senator Frame, Happy New Year, and thank you for diving right in and being ready to champion our priorities. One thing I'm going to ask is if you could speak to the spend plan a little bit, illuminating the investments in affordable housing as well as home ownership, because these are the champions that we would be asking to lean in and partner on that work. And then if you could also just talk us through the politics of, you know, what do we anticipate as support currently? We're feeling more positive, more hopeful for this bill in conversations I've heard. I think I'm beginning to see the other side of voices, folks beginning to just take interest. So if you could just speak into the crystal ball a little bit and help people get ready to advocate for the work in 25.
Great. Well, let me just start with that. I mean, I wish it were the case, once again, that people were as passionate and interested in thinking deeply about tax policy as I am. But sadly, as this is the case with all tax policy, including this proposal, it often takes a crisis for people to really dig in deeply and really think about this. For folks looking at billions of dollars of cuts to essential public programs, like access to childcare, like K-12 education, like these incredible programs that we have, like the Housing Trust Fund, and including the home ownership unit, this is the moment where people are going, oof, maybe I should learn about that policy. Maybe I should start to really dig in and understand. And so despite this piece of legislation having been out there for 4 years at this point, we are just now seeing engagement from a lot of folks that prior to this were like, we got plenty of federal money. There's no crisis. We don't need to worry about this. Of course, it would have been really great to have passed it 2 or 4 years ago so that it was already on the books working and collecting revenue at this point. That's neither here nor there. I'm delighted to see a lot of engagement on this. So Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling more encouraged than I have from the moment I started thinking about this legislation. A lot of people are asking me really good substantive questions. I'm getting, and I will just say, by way of example, when I first introduced this legislation, 2021, I had some really initial thoughtful technical feedback. Great example, Russell Investments looked at this the moment I dropped the bill and said, did you mean to have us, the fund managers, pay this? Or did you mean for us to have the people that own the assets pay this? And I said, oh, definitely the latter. Like, what are you seeing in the bill? And Russell Investments found something that was sort of a really important technical detail that like Department of Revenue had missed. I'm starting to get great questions like that again, which I'm very encouraged by. And I'm able to say, yes, we have thought about that. Here's how we've addressed it. Or, wow, nobody has said that to me before. So that to me is a very strong sign that people are engaging really, really seriously. Honestly, the only real opposition I ever hear is sort of the typical tropes about taxes. And it's the tax flight threat. It doesn't matter what tax type it is. It doesn't matter if it's on corporations or individuals. It doesn't matter what type of tax it is. The threat of tax flight is almost always the argument that we hear anytime we were looking at tax increases. Corporations are going to move. Wealthy people are going to move. We heard it with capital gains. It wasn't true. We've heard it with other business taxes. It wasn't true. And frankly, sometimes we have given into that, given tax breaks, and people have still left. And so there's really an inverse relationship here. It's not true. And so I think dealing with that kind of typical trope and typical threat is sort of the main opposition that I have to navigate throughout this. Beyond that, the people are with us. The last poll we did on this, it was something like 67%. The Seattle Times commissioned their own poll in December, which was deeply surprising to me. The Stuart Elway poll just came out, not on wealth tax specifically, but on given the choices the state has to make about cutting versus taxes. And if they do taxes, how would you like them to approach it? Not surprisingly, taxing the wealthy rather than uniformly taxing everybody was the recommended approach in that poll. So I think the voters have made their preference very clear. It's whether or not we follow the guidance from the voters and from the people we represent. Great question. Long answer. Sorry, I'll make them tighter.
Great answer, I'll say. Well, moving on to you speaking to the home ownership investments from the resource, just so our partners here are ready to wrap their heads around that and support it as it gets introduced.
Yeah, you got it. So one of the things, given the shift into my role in this vice chair of finance, I have to build an entire package that I can get sufficient votes for. So I will be having conversations with every single member of my caucus, and I know my counterpart, Finance Chair Berg, is doing the same thing. So we've got to put together a package that we can get the votes for. I will tell you, I am certainly not alone in my very strong belief that we should be making investments in expanding access to affordable housing, and particularly in home ownership. This call knows very well that I am personally the beneficiary of the home ownership down payment assistance program here in Washington State. Denise, I'm looking right at you, my friend and neighbor, who literally I wouldn't be a homeowner had it not been for Denise Rodriguez saying, do you know about this program? I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I had a house. It was amazing. So thank you, State of Washington. So I am a firm believer in the programs that we offer and the power that they have to help move people from a cycle of being a perpetual renter to having the opportunity to have a permanent home and to build wealth. And there is a through line between that program and the fact that we are not taxing the extreme and extraordinary wealth held in capital assets. There is a through line there. There is a story to tell about how important it is that we make this investment, connect these dots so that Washington State does not just devolve into a playground for the rich, and that regular people can still afford to live here, work here, build their homes, and raise their families here. So I think there's an important through line, and I will certainly be sharing my opinion with my colleagues. I do feel pretty strongly that part of the other piece that this could fund is education. And I think K-12 in particular, because again, our K-12 schools are primarily funded through the property tax on real estate. And again, I think it's an important story to have the wealthiest among us in this state share in the responsibility of fully funding our public schools. And it is already done through the property tax. This would merely expand the property tax to include financial capital assets. So those are the two things that are very obvious to me. I've got my own personal preferences about pairing it with, tax reductions for working people. I have a strong belief that we should be investing in expanding access to housing and education and other services for the developmental disabilities community. I believe that very strongly. I will share my opinion. And I have got to build a package I can get the votes for. So we will see where we end up with my colleagues.
Thank you so much for taking some time with us today, Senator Frame. Happy New Year to you. And we're excited to be in this with you, excited to see the wealth tax come back. And we will all be there to advocate for you. So we'll be looking for it week 3 and on. And we appreciate that it's not going to be coming out of the door next Monday. Give us a moment to catch ourselves a little bit and get ready.
Yes, me too. I also need to take a breather. So thanks all. Have a great day. Happy New Year, and see you in full swing starting on Monday.
All right. So we heard from Senator Bateman and Senator Frame.
Bambi, we can hardly hear you.
Is that true? Can you hear me better now? No. Well, that's always lovely, isn't it? When you're hosting and people can't hear you.
You sound a lot further away than you did before.
All right. I'm just
It's a change.
further away when I came closer. That's great. Well, I'm going to speak loudly and hope that it sounds like maybe a normal tone here. But we're going to move forward now with Dan Bertolet of Sightline Institute and hear from him today about the lot splitting bill. Dan, the floor is yours.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me well. Well, thanks for inviting me, Bambi. And great to see everyone again. And this amazing network of people doing all kinds of really good and important work. So I think most people on this call are familiar with the idea of a lot split bill. The bill's been in play in Washington the last 2 sessions. I presented to this group on the lot split bill in, I think, early 2023. And BHI has had the lot split bill as one of its legislative priorities in those last 2 sessions. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about why we need the bill. But I will say, just to summarize, the purpose of the bill is to allow homeowners to sell off part of their lot for the construction of another house. Pretty simple idea. And one key factor in it is that it would allow subdivision of a house lot into smaller lots than what the minimum is required by zoning, right? So it's a way to get smaller lots. And so the main thing it does to increase homeownership options is it creates smaller lots, and that allows the construction of smaller houses, which are less expensive. Again, pretty simple concept. So if you don't have an option to split lots, what tends to happen is you'll have sort of modest, older, smaller houses getting demolished and converted into giant McMansions that take up the entire lot and sell for a lot of money. And so if you do have a lot split option, if it's legal to split off your lot easily, you end up having a situation where you can preserve the existing modest, low-cost house, and you get a second less expensive house. So it's sort of a win-win. And that points to sort of another benefit for existing homeowners. If an owner happens to be sort of house rich and cash poor, it gives them a way to extract some of the money out of their property and allows them to age in place in their house, in their community, instead of being forced to sell and leave their community. So it's sort of a community stabilization effect as well. So that's basically why legalizing lot splitting is a good idea. I wanted to get into a little bit of the history of the bill because it's kind of weird. It's been a very popular bill, but it hasn't passed yet. In 2023, the bill passed the House 94-2, a really nice bipartisan vote on it. Then in the Senate, it got bogged down, and there was sort of a lot of swirling uncertainty about the middle housing bills and the ADU bill that were both in play during that time, and members were concerned about what would happen if, the combined effect of those two bills together plus a lot split. So basically, the lot split bill in 2023 was sacrificed for the other two bills. So in 2024, it was back again, the same bill. And in this case, the House, on its very first day, the very first thing it did in the 2024 session was to pass the lot split bill again, 94-2. And then it went over to the Senate. And I don't know how to say this delicately, but it ran into some sort of unfortunate member relationship challenges over in the Senate and died again. So now, the 2025 session, it's back again. This time, again, primed by Andrew Barkis. And this time around, it does have a few changes compared with the previous bill. I'll just run through those quickly. So one problem with the 2023 bill was that it didn't define exactly what the process would be to do the lot split. And so that means that it likely would have defaulted to what's called a short subdivision. And that's a common process, but it's also one that's relatively complicated, designed for builders to do. It takes time and money, and not likely something the average homeowner would want to take on. So what the new bill does to address that, it's basically the one key idea in the new bill is that it creates a process for the average homeowner. And what it does is it creates a brand new administrative lot split process that's happens fast, it's not appealable. The idea is that the average homeowner would be able to do it without spending a ton of time and money. Another big difference in the bill is that it would only apply in areas where the 2023 middle housing bill applies, which basically is medium to large cities, but not in counties. And so, and the bill also draws from the middle housing bill in that it allows lot splits down to 1,000 square feet, which is what the middle housing bill does. But that the intention in the middle housing bill was to allow for lot splits for townhouses. And that lot splitting process, again, would have been a short subdivision. It's something that builders know how to do with their lawyers and they have time and money, but not something that really would be very workable for the average homeowner. And let's see, that the bill has a few guardrails on it, similar to the bill from the last year, the last version of the bill. Most importantly, you can only do the lot split bill once, so you can't, split a lot and split it again and split it again. That was one of the biggest concerns folks had. So that's an overview of what the bill does. So once again this year, the lot split bill is sort of at the head of the line for housing bills in Washington, and it actually has a hearing this Monday, the first hearing in the House Housing Committee. This next Monday at 1:30. I just learned about this, and of course, we'd love to have all the support from BHI members as we get. You can already go there and sign in and sign in pro or sign up to testify, and I can drop links for that into the chat for folks Also can drop the link in for the bill. It's HB 1096. So maybe I'll stop there and take questions.
All right. I've changed a little bit of my parameters on my audio. Is it much better? You can hear me, Dan?
Louder. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's what happens when you take away, automatically adjust your microphone volume. Take away the auto. Anyone have a question for Dan around the lot splitting bill? I'm really excited to hear that you kind of started to wrestle with the implementation and thought about that administrative pathway, because that is a thing that becomes really complicated for people to want to utilize a lot split. Are they going to take all of that time and effort and money to be able to do all that legality? So I'm excited to read the bill and see how that turned out. Any other questions coming from the floor for Dan right now?
I have a question.
Great.
So would the new lot that's created with its own parcel number be subject to existing zoning requirements? So for non-homeownership purposes?
Yeah, so the only local zoning rule that would not apply is actually minimum lot size. So all the other rules in the zoning in terms of setbacks and lot coverage and all those things would still apply.
Any other questions?
I also have a question. If we wanted to testify in support of that bill, what are the key messages that you would want us to make sure that we hit in our testimony?
Well, if you're testifying on behalf of the BHI, it would be nice to emphasize opportunities for Black home ownership. And a couple of years ago, when we were working on this, we did a memo working with Bambi that sort of covers those issues and kind of gives talking points. So I can share that with you. There's also, I wrote a Sightline article on the bill a couple of years ago that has, I think it has a pretty nice list of kind of the summary benefits of what lot splitting would enable. But Denise, if you're planning to testify, I'd be happy to talk to you offline about things that you can emphasize that would sort of complement what other people are saying.
Great, I'll follow up offline.
Thank you.
Dan, I don't know if you guys talk about this, but it's also a displacement strategy, right? You're creating a new lot for a new house, but you may also be providing financial liquidity for the current homeowner to be able to retain ownership where they are.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I've got some words about that in my Sightline article, also in this Black Home BHI memo that we did a couple of years ago.
Maybe that's where I got the idea, by reading your article, and I've just forgotten to provide proper credit.
No worries.
Well, then, now that we know that you are going to be first out of the gate, a Monday meeting, I will be writing up the digest for Friday. And so you and I should connect so that we have all of those links. So people will be able to instantly do, 30-second sign in pro, register to testify or send written testimony, and then we'll recirculate that brief that you created. There might be a little bit of change you need to do on there because you do have this new mechanism part, but in general,
Right.
I think you were just talking about how it creates options for people.
Right. Great.
And we just have one more minute here. Ruby, do you have a question that we can kind of wrap up with for Dan?
Dan, when is public comment? And yes, I'd like to get some of those talking points too.
Great. Okay. I'll try to follow up. I can grab your email from the meeting list, I assume.
All right, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Dan. Stay connected. I know that you're, going to be watching everything that's happening as we move along here. We hope to see you replicate your quick, passage in the House, but we're hoping that the Senate has changed enough this year that you're not going to see that stall that happened, that we're actually going to see this move forward. There's a lot of movement in the Senate in leadership and in the way that they're doing committees. So it feels like a good year where this
Yep.
could, be the one.
Yep, me too. Thanks.
All right. So we thank Dan for joining us. And then next we're going to be hearing from Jesse Simpson of HDC. Jesse's going to be talking to us about another kind of immediate opportunity for advocacy that's coming up. The Seattle Comprehensive Plan finished up all of its input to the OPCD department, part of the mayor, and now it's moving on into the Seattle City Council. So the council will be thinking through what they have there as a suggestion. They'll be taking in input, and Jesse is going to join in us and telling us a little bit about that. So Jesse, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bambi. Little brief interregnum here on the to focus on some local issues with the Seattle Comprehensive Plan update. I've had the pleasure of giving you all some overviews on the Seattle Comprehensive Plan over a few different BHI meetings. And now we're really in full mobilization push. The City Council has convened a comp plan select committee, basically a council committee of the entire council. The mayor has transmitted his proposed One Seattle plan and draft zoning to the council. And so now it's really in their hands to shape what the next 10, 20 years of growth and development looks like for the city of Seattle. There's a pretty long timeline here, but I think it's really important that we get some good pro-housing voices engaged in the process up front. So I'm going to go through some of the ways you can get engaged. I think first off, the most important thing we can have is people showing up to the February 5th public hearing on the mayor's proposed comprehensive plan, as well as any of the committee hearings which you are able to attend and give public comment at too. The council kicked off the committee hearing process this past week, and there was a pretty big attendance of kind of traditional NIMBY neighborhood voices from neighborhoods like Madrona and Maple Leaf, pushing against the mayor's proposed plan, and in particular against proposals to increase allowed housing in traditional wealthy and exclusive and white neighborhoods of Seattle. So I think it's, we have been engaged in this process to push for as many improvements to the comprehensive plan and to the mayor's proposal as possible. We're still highlighting some recommended areas for improvement, ways that the plan can better support housing affordability, abundance, and scale up anti-displacement strategies. At the same time, we're also shifting into a more self-consciously defensive strategy here, looking to lock in the benefits of the plan as it has been proposed by the mayor and Office of Planning and Community Development in the face of some growing backlash. So I put the link to all of the upcoming hearings in the chat. You can go to our website, completecommunitiescoalition.org/action. Here you can sign up for some testimony reminders, get connected with FutureWise and their mobilization team. We also have a form letter, which you can utilize. Please do customize that, tell your own story. It always makes much more of an impact. But something I really want to emphasize is the importance of council hearing from folks who care about housing, because I think the tone set by the first committee meeting was not particularly helpful when it comes to ensuring that the next 20-year plan for growth is really forward-looking and meeting our needs as a city. We also have some talking points for you to use in testimony, but again, would emphasize like the real benefits of telling your own story, saying why it is that you care about housing affordability and how you can see the comp plan supporting your goals. So I think I can stop sharing here and maybe shift over to some more open questions or comments.
Thank you, Jesse. So as Jesse said, this is a process that goes over a few months, but you know, it's kind of the tone that gets set in the next couple weeks that's going to lead it. If you had an opportunity to see the reviews of the January 6th meeting, you know, it was well attended by people who could be there in the middle of the day on Monday to talk about how, you know, they want to make sure that they can keep what they have. So it would be great to hear some new voices looking at how we think about the next 20 years in our city. Here within the Black Home Initiative policy group, you know, we're always thinking about Black home ownership. We've heard from a lot of people within community about the ability to live where you want to live for as long as you can be there. So things like stacked flats are important. And that's one of the talking points that you'll see in some of the resources Jesse had. Jesse, are there some other kind of particular talking points that you see relevant for our goal to increase Black home ownership?
Yeah, I think some of the other particular talking points to emphasize are on expanding the proposed affordable housing density bonus. I think this is a quite strong part of the proposal, and it could be further strengthened by extending it citywide, not just to the areas around frequent transit, and coupling it with a similar bonus in low-rise zones to allow for feasible affordable housing development in the existing low-rise areas. And you know, we're still pushing for some additional neighborhood centers in low displacement risk, high opportunity neighborhoods like North Broadway, Gasworks, Loyal Heights, Seward Park, Alki. I think those are an opportunity to add more homeownership opportunities in what have been often Seattle's most exclusive neighborhoods and around some of our biggest parks. I think, again, it's a balance between pushing for more and also supporting the positive elements of the plan as proposed.
All right, and it looks like we have time for just one question. Ms. Ruby, you have a question to help us close out this section here with Jesse? Oh, and we can't hear you, so we'll need you to unmute.
Hi, Jesse.
There we go. Yes.
I went to all of the virtual question and answer sessions that OPCD had, but it sounds like there's some other kind of community feedback session that I'd like a little bit more information about. Plus, one last thing, you know, the mayor hasn't come up with his anti-displacement plan yet. And they talked about a phase 3 that's going to have to be presented. So how are we going to, you know, give feedback on this and him ultimately, you know, the council ultimately deciding what they want to do without being able to do all that yet?
Yeah, so it is definitely in the council hands at this point. During the last October through December comment feedback rounds, in addition to the official city ones, a number of smaller like neighborhood councils hosted some of their own feedback sessions. The Madrona one was particularly spicy, evidently. I think in terms of how to engage at this point, it is, I would point you towards the council piece. There will be down the line some conversations about the existing urban centers and the zoning there. And that'll be another phase of feedback for the mayor's office, but that's, I would say, 8 to 9 months down the line. In terms of the anti-displacement framework, that it was delayed in its release, but it was eventually put out. Let me try and pull it up here. You know, I think that's one of the pieces where you could give some targeted feedback to this framework, and specifically asking council members to strengthen the framework.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Welcome. And Bambi, you're muted.
There we go. Now it's in the hands of the council, as Jesse was saying. So that's where you want to concentrate your efforts. And the chair of the select committee is council member Joy Hollingsworth. And of course, all of the different council members are on the select committee. So this is a good opportunity for you to begin to reach out to them via email, in addition to these opportunities that we're talking about that have been organized by the Complete Communities Coalition. So I will make sure again that this is all within our network digest on Fridays so that you can just pop it open, understand what your opportunities are for the next week or two, and then start thinking about what you want to do here in the future. Thanks so much for spending some time with us, Jesse, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear from you because it is something that's going to go on throughout the year. But again, a public hearing opportunity coming up. If your Mondays aren't free and you're just hanging around waiting to do a committee, you can do the public hearings, which tend to happen in the evening and are a little bit easier for all of us to adjust to. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can move forward with just kind of a wrap up around the session. I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about that process and the timeline, so that we can all get back to the same page about where we are and what's going to happen next. So thanks again to all of our speakers today. I know that that was kind of a lot of information to process, but before I open the floor from news for you and from you, I wanted to remind us all what we can expect from the 2025 state legislative session in terms of that process and timeline and how you can influence the outcomes. So just a quick primer here, you know, a bill is created ideally when a sponsor and a stakeholder group or stakeholders come together to solve an issue. You can influence the bill by your participation in a formal stakeholder process. Sometimes people are invited to those because the idea is already in work and, you know, that's the way it can go. But you can also just help elevate an issue and then find that solution so that that sponsor has a seed for the idea for a bill. During the legislative process, a bill goes through both chambers, the House and the Senate, and if there's both the House and Senate version of the bill, this process happens in parallel. But if there's only a House bill or only a Senate bill, then the bill will go through the legislative process in its chamber of origin, and then it will head over to the opposite chamber. Regardless, all bills have to go through this process in both the chamber of origin and the opposite chamber if they're going to become a law. So bills go to the policy committee, and that's the policy committee that's related to the topic of the bill. A lot of the things that are on our policy framework will be going through the housing committee. Some may be going through local government. They'll be going through ways and means. These bills, basically, if they have anything to do with money, will go through the fiscal committee next. And then they head to the rules committee, and that determines whether or not they'll schedule that bill to be heard on the floor. And you can influence this process in all committees, even the rules committee. The rules committee doesn't meet and provide time for public comment, and they debate outside of the public eye, but you can influence the debate by reaching out to rules committee members and to those who can influence their choices and request that they are scheduling a bill for a floor vote. Policy committees and fiscal committees have public hearings and open debate before they vote. At those public hearings, you can sign in pro or con for the bill. You can email your written testimony, or you can provide remote or in-person testimony during the hearings. You can always email specific legislators and ask them to support a bill, and these actions will influence the debate and the vote. I'll be advertising these types of advocacy opportunities in our BHI Network Policy Digest for those bills that are in the homeownership policy framework. It only takes 30 seconds to sign in pro or con for a bill, so I hope each of you will consider this your kind of baseline commitment during the session to go ahead and take that 30 seconds and sign in pro or con. If you are able to testify, I'm often going to be able to provide you with talking points that you can use in your written or your verbal testimony. But I do want to remind you, as Jesse said as well, your own perspective and experience is the most powerful testimony. Giving one heartfelt reason why you are supporting something is so much more impactful than any kind of jargon-filled run-on that's going to happen. I mean, everyone up there is doing that, and when you come in and you just are straightforward and you're sharing your own story, you're going to have impact. You're getting a very limited time frame to speak, usually less than 2 minutes. So you're really not there to say everything that you could say. You're there to make an impression, whether you're speaking or writing. So it's clear and concise and meaningful words that are impactful. And someone who communicates one clear idea will be remembered a lot more than someone who has, all the jargon in the world. Once a bill has gone through all the committees in a chamber and it's been added to the schedule for a floor vote by the Rules Committee, it will go to the floor for debate, and the bill may face amendments. Each amendment must be debated and voted on to become a part of the bill that receives the final yes or no vote from the full House or the full Senate. So again, you influence those outcomes by connecting with legislators about the bill and the amendments that you support, and this will affect the debate and the bill's chance for passage. There are calendar cutoff dates for completing parts of the legislative process. If a bill does not accomplish a needed task before a cutoff date, then that bill may be dead for the year. So the session is beginning this upcoming Monday, January 13th. It's going to end on May 27th. So we have 105 days of lawmaking and budget writing ahead of us. And this can begin to feel a bit like a marathon, but I'll do my best to distill the session down to the essential advocacy opportunities and present those in our weekly digest. So just a primer there again on what we're going to see in the process. And then if you were at the Policy Summit in December, you received an overview of our homeownership policy framework. I'm not going to repeat that here because we don't have the time, but just a reminder, we come into these meetings, we hear from policy champions, we compile that list of what's going to most effectively increase Black homeownership. We publish that framework, and then we're here to advocate for the policies. And that framework's a living document. So you have it, you can download it from the digest you're receiving, contribute to its improvement. Things are moving every day. We just heard 3 new bill numbers that we didn't know, yesterday. So definitely reach out, let me know what's missing, let me know what you know, keep me informed so I can help others. And then again, we're going to be looking at actions that most effectively increase Black homeownership. They can be at the city, the county, or the state level. Since we're in the session and it's a long one, there are a lot of state bills this year, but it goes back and forth from year to year. But we're going to look at funding. We're going to look at cost reduction, zoning and regulatory reform, and then basically the acquisition of land and capturing that value. So you do have the new framework. It will be updated as we get the bill numbers. It will be updated with links for them. You have lead items here that we are leading on, and then also those support items. And one thing to remember about our framework is it's not a wish list. Those support items need champions to connect with me in order for those alerts to get out. So if you are a main champion in one of those support items, please do be sending me the email that says, here's the bill number, here's the first opportunity to sign in pro, here's the link. Whatever you can do to help would be best. I will be keeping a close eye on the lead items, but there's just no way I'm going to be able to, 20 plus items, know where it's all going. So if we don't want to miss opportunities, we just need you to lead in on those support items so that we are all informed. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. cannot believe that we have actually reached towards the end of our meeting. That was a lot. I know it's a lot to process, and I'm so excited to see you all here on this first week of the new year. And what I'm going to do now is just open the floor. So this is an opportunity for you to share some news, something that might be relevant for the group. If you have a correction or something I'm missing, I'd love to have it. So it looks like Kathleen, you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Bambi. I shared this out just to reinforce the importance of the work of this group. I'm sharing a brief anecdote from Homestead's work. Early this year, we sent out just our normal, hey, this is what we got done in 2024, bullet point list of things. One of the things we talked about was that we started construction on 2 projects in the Finney Ridge neighborhood, a neighborhood with high home prices and a history of racially restrictive covenants. We heard immediately from 2 of the folks who live in the Finney Ridge neighborhood, one of whom was a serial litigant who effectively stopped both of those projects from moving forward for 3 years on procedural grounds, and her friend in the neighborhood objecting to the characterization of their neighborhood as having been affected by racially restrictive covenants. They categorically refused to accept it at first that there were covenants. And then when I shared with them the University of Washington's map showing that there were 13 covenants in the geographic area that they were talking about, they said, well, that's not all the land in the neighborhoods. You shouldn't say that the whole neighborhood was subject to these covenants, and then taking issue with the approach of saying that it's a desirable outcome to have people of color purchase the homes. There's kind of a crazy all or nothing kind of argument that they put out there. I just want to raise that because I think in these spaces, sometimes we don't hear that pushback. And it is out there, folks, and people have been emboldened to express it by the current political environment. So we're going to keep fighting the good fight. We know that this might signal some type of new legal challenge from these folks, but just want to put that out there to say, keep up the good work. Let's build the network and keep pushing forward for the systemic solutions that we're all in favor of.
Thank you so much for saying those words, Kathleen. Thank you for letting us understand that situation's happening, that unfortunate situation's happening. But as you said, it's a good reminder of why we are here together as a network. When we come together and we use our connective forces together, we can really create that impact. So happy to see you all here today and leaning in. We have a few more minutes till the end of the meeting here. Is there anyone else who may have an announcement, something that's coming up that should be on our radars, or just a reflection that they had today?
I had one question. I thought legislative session ends April 27th.
You might be right. I'll check the dates. I know it's going to be like a Sunday, and I may have put in the wrong date at the late hour in which I finished that. So yeah. I'll put the correct date in where we're going to go.
I hope so, because I scheduled my post-session vacation time for May. So
well, no, it looks like Cliff is reiterating it does end on 4/27.
Oh, great. Phew.
So you can have a great Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah. Hopefully session goes the way that we want it and all of our bills pass.
Yes, that is actually something to bring up, Denise. We're in a very interesting scenario in this session with a budget deficit, and it is the job of the legislature to have a budget. So if they cannot figure that out during the 105 days of the legislative session, it may not end on April 27th. So we definitely want to be encouraging anything we can to help that along. Be very clear in our advocacy, bringing our voice so that there isn't any well, should we do it or should we not do it? You know, let's let people know what we think. Nobody wants that session running past April 27th, but it is the job of the legislature to create a budget for our state. And so they will need to figure that out. All right, well, you know, we're 5 minutes out to the hour. I know everybody is probably having a little bit low blood sugar and it's time for lunch. So if anyone wants to close us out with any last thoughts, I'd be happy to hand over the floor. Feeling good? All right, well, I encourage you all, if you have the possibility at all, to get outside for just a few moments. There is actually some blue in that sky right now, and it is not a guarantee in the winter. And I will be seeing you all hopefully here in February. February 13th will be our next policy group meeting. Please do reach out to me at any time with any questions. So we'll be ready for our Valentine's Day edition in February, and keep an eye out on the digest. It is going to start to get a little longer. There are going to be more opportunities for you to advocate, but I believe that's why you're here, that you're looking for the opportunity to affect change. You know, getting informed is great, but actually doing that movement of putting your voice in is what's going to create the change we want to see. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful Happy New Year.
Thanks, Bambi.
Happy New Year, y'all.
Thank you.